Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very empowering show coming right up with special guest, Dr. Tiffany Breeding, and she's here today to share with us her new book, The Metabolic Makeover, 8 Weeks to Micro Mastery. Now, Dr. Tiffany Breeding, otherwise known as Dr. Tiff, earned her master's degree in kinesiology, performance psychology from Georgia Southern, and her PhD in health and human performance from Middle Tennessee State. Dr. Tiff is also a certified strength and conditioning specialist and fitness nutrition specialist. For the past 7 years, Dr. Tiff has been providing corporate and executive performance to clients through work sites and employee wellness programs. She uses her unique combination of mental and physical performance training to offer clients nutrition counseling, metabolic restoration, and performance coaching. So let's welcome to the show, Dr. Tiff.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Oh, what a pleasure it is to have you here. So looking forward to talking with you about this book because it's a little different than most of the books that are out there.
You know, I really think it is, and of course I'm a little biased, but I think a lot of the nutrition industry has a weight loss perspective versus how do we fuel performance, how do we drive mental and physical energy levels. And so I'm hoping that this might give people just a little bit of a different take on things.
Well, and so why don't we kind of start at the beginning here? So, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, I grew up an athlete, just from the time I was little. I always joke I had cleats on my feet when I came out. But so it's just always been something that has been a passion for me around athletics and performance-related activity. And so when I went on to pursue, my education and thinking about what was I passionate about and how could I fuse my profession and my personal interest, it really just led me to performance psychology initially, which is really where I try to bring the mindset into the book. So much of behavior change is not just a physical change. It's about changing your perspective and changing your motivation. So that was kind of the first direction I went. And then as I got further into my schooling, I realized, I really wanted to fuse that physical and mental gap. And so that's where I brought in the exercise science component and then eventually the fitness nutrition piece of things. And so the book itself and just my coaching perspective in general, I really try to bring a unique fusion of mental performance and physical performance together.
Well, isn't that the truth? I mean, when we talk about the mental aspect, I think you're 100% right. It's, people, they get really focused on the things that we can do, like the exercises and the diets and all that, but it's like the mental part kind of gets left behind.
Well, it does, and I think that's the root of things, and I think that's what you see in the diet industry, which I really hate that word, and I think a lot of people are starting to hate that word, but for better or worse, that's what it's called. So in the diet industry, you see just short-term fixes, and because they're not changing how they're looking at food, how they're looking at exercise, and what's driving their motivation, not just short-term, but more long-term and sustainability-wise, then it does become frustrating because you try and you fall off and you try and you fall off. If we can get to the root of those emotionally driven behaviors and what's causing me to make that choice over this or to not adhere to an exercise program, then we can hopefully change things for the long term.
Well, and when you work with somebody on that mental part, what are some of the common things that you see that keep people behind, keep them stuck?
I think if at the end of the day, time management is a big one. We're overworked. We're typically underprepared and just rolling on the last little bit of energy we have at the end of the day because we've gotten behind the 8 ball. And so then we get home and we're tired and we're hungry and we call takeout, or we're at work and we forgot our lunch because we were busy packing the kiddos' lunches and getting them ready for school, and we put ourselves on the back burner as parents a lot of times. So I think time management is a big one that really hinders people's changing behaviors, and I think also lack of education. There's so much information out there, and I've thrown my hat in the ring now as another different approach to things, but I think you have to really be able to sift through all the noise that's out there on the internet and various channels of communication. I think people get overwhelmed. It's like I call it paralysis by analysis, and then you just don't know what to do.
Isn't that the truth, right?
I just sit and do nothing. That's better because we don't know what to do.
Yeah, kind of like, I'm just not, they say chocolate's good. It's not good. I'll just go with the good portion of that and, and forget it.
Absolutely. It's low fat, then it's high fat, then it's low carb, then it's carbs are amazing. And, so I think for me as a coach and hopefully now as an author, I'm trying to give people a clear perspective of there is a balance there. There isn't a right answer. There's a million ways to skin a cat, and you have to just go with what works for you. And I think as, social beings, we tend to just compare, okay, this is working for so-and-so, it must work for me. So you try that approach, and it doesn't work for you. So having some individualized recommendations and coaching is also really important in this process.
Yeah. Well, I love how in your book you talk about, developing the skills to kind of interpret food labels, because my goodness, there are so many times I actually just did this earlier this week. I picked up a can and I'm like, what the heck is all this? I had no clue.
Absolutely. What am I looking at?
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at the food label, but what does it mean? For me, my approach is focused on three main nutrients. So we have macronutrients, which are our carbohydrates, our fat, and our protein. And you can certainly get into the hairy details of unsaturated fats and saturated fats, but when we're just trying, again, to sift through the noise and get down to the nitty-gritty of what really is important, I think on a food label, it's one, being mindful of how many servings is in that container, because, think about that can of soup you picked up. You look at the food label, and it's got a certain amount of calories listed, which is the amount of fuel that it's providing your body, and then it's got the amount of total protein, carbohydrates, and fats, but that's for one serving, and that can is probably at least 2 servings. So if you sit down and you eat that whole can and you're assuming, oh, I just ate what's on the food label, you probably ate twice what's on the food label if there's 2 servings in that can of soup. So I think that's something that someone that's very new to looking at labels, I use soda as a good example. If you go buy a 20-ounce soda in the gas station, that's 2.5 servings of soda. And who drinks half of that? I'm drinking the whole thing. If I'm going to get that soda, I'm drinking the whole bottle of soda, and you've drank, there's probably, let's say, 30 grams of sugar in one serving. So you've just had almost 75, 90 grams of sugar in that soda, thinking that the whole thing was a serving. So I think don't be deceived that a container equals the serving size. So that's really something to be aware of as a consumer. And like I said, again, then looking at, depending on your goals, if you are trying to watch carbohydrate intake, let's say, you've had prediabetes indicators, or you are diabetic and you're trying to watch your sugar intake, paying attention to carbohydrates. Other people may have goals to be watching fat content. So those nutrients are listed there too to be a good piece of information depending on what your goals are.
Yeah. Well, and it's good to have some kind of a place to start when we look at all of that, because the thing is that there is so much conflicting information out there. And I love in your book you talk about the Holy Trinity, and I'd love for you to share that with us.
Sure. Well, that's kind of where I was going. The carbohydrate, fat, and protein is what I call the holy trinity, because it doesn't matter what approach you're taking. You know, if we use some of the mainstream nutrition approaches right now, you've got the keto diet, you've got the paleo approach, you've got the Atkins, and these are all different, but they all have to do with how much of the macronutrients you're eating. And those three macronutrients, the holy trinity, is your carbohydrate, fat, and protein. So does it matter which approach you're taking? And I don't necessarily adhere to one approach, because I think everyone needs a different approach. But regardless, you have to understand the benefits and the sources and the overall definition of what a carbohydrate is, what a protein is, and what a fat is within your diet, so that you can modify and change and pay attention to, like you said, on that food label, depending on the goals that you have and the type of nutrients your body is trying to derive each day. You need to know how to look at that label and say, okay, this is how much of those nutrients are in this food that I'm eating. So I really want to help people understand that, because then you can carry that with you. Your life changes, your metabolism changes, your goals change. So you might follow a number of different approaches through your life. But if you know the foundation of those three nutrients, then you can always apply it to no matter what approach you're taking.
I think that's real encouraging for people to hear, because as we go through our journey and, during different ages in our lifetime, our bodies need different amounts of nutrients, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the science around, when we turn 40 years old, that great sound barrier for many of us, we inevitably hit a downshift in our metabolism. And part of that is due to the amount of muscle that we have on our body. And it doesn't matter if you're lifting weights your whole life or if you've been an athlete, certainly there's going to be some different changes that take place. And one of those is that we start to lose muscle mass through the aging process. So we can certainly do some things like weight-bearing exercises and be mindful of protein intake and take care of our bone density and things like that to offset those effects. But when we lose lean mass, which is bone, muscle, organs, body water, all of those components of lean mass, then our metabolism does slow down. So we have to be mindful as we change and our bodies change. Same thing post-pregnancy. A lot of clients with kids, maybe they've just had a baby and they're coming in, or they have 2 or 3 and they're, 4 or 5 years post-pregnancy. Their bodies change. Things aren't quite in the same place anymore. And so their goals from that point versus when they were 25 might be very different. So we definitely have to be cognizant of that. And I think the biggest suggestion I can give is not to look at our bodies with judgment, but with curiosity, and just say, this is where I am right now, and how do I approach myself today? Because if we all look at ourselves when we were 18 with the metabolism on high and everything looking like we wanted it to, we get frustrated, right? We just have to be okay with where we are now and make those adjustments.
Oh, isn't that the truth, And things are so much different at different stages in our lives. And it's interesting, you kind of touched on this a little bit when we started our conversation. You talk about, we've got parents who now they're taking care of kids and getting their food ready, and then parents are like, well, what the heck am I going to do for me? We're kind of usually parents are the last person on the list of people to be thought of. So what are some tips that you can give our listeners for, just like people on the go? Like, how can they still maintain, a healthy diet intake while they're running around?
Well, I think one is when we do have busy schedules and when we do have a full plate with kids or work travel or whatever the situation may be, if we are willing to put some time in on the front end, it's going to save us a ton of time on the back end. So taking some time on the weekends when you probably have a little bit more flexibility in your schedule, and it may not be the weekend, maybe it's a Wednesday, whatever day for you is a little more clear on your schedule, can you use that to prepare some meals in advance so that when you get home and it's late and the kids are coming in from practice and they're starving, then you can just pull out the crock pot meal and put it on the plate instead of having to start from scratch when you get home. So I think having some forethought and planning to have the resources you need at home and ready, and it doesn't have to be, this is where I think people feel it's daunting, like they've got to cook from scratch. It's not that. It's just, could you have some frozen veggies, some microwave rice, and some pre-made chicken breasts in the fridge and heat them up and put them out? It doesn't have to be real complicated, but at least you're getting a balanced meal. So I think planning and preparing ahead of time is always helpful. Those one-pot meals, the Instapot, crock pot meals are so easy and usually have a lot of really good nutrients involved, whether it's a lean protein like chicken or a pork tenderloin that you could cook all day. And then I think the other thing is with restaurants out, you can typically find healthy now. You just have to take a little bit of time on the front end. If there's some restaurants that you guys always run through, take some time and get online, check out the menu, look at some of the nutritional values. Almost all the chain restaurants now will have nutritional data on their website, and then you can at least know some healthier options when you go in, so that if you are stressed out going in there and everything's a little hectic, you make a better choice because you're not just so overwhelmed that you don't want to think about it, but okay, I can get this, this, or this at this restaurant, or if I run through this drive-through, I know this is a better choice. So I would say take advantage of the information, too, that's out there now on the Internet, where you can at least go through and look at what the options are and modify some things if you need to.
Oh, that's so important, my goodness, because, we are so busy, and being able to do that, what a huge impact that will make.
It will, and I think you were mentioning with kids, and I think we have to also be aware of how that's going to impact their choices, and we certainly want to keep a healthy balance of how much we emphasize weight or dieting or nutrition to our kids, but you do want to model the healthier choices as much as you can and teach them that there are times for fun foods, which is what I like to call that 20%, the things that we wouldn't eat every day, but also that they understand and see that you're making choices that are driving your health and your performance, and you don't have to talk about losing weight or getting skinny, but you can talk about just being healthy and getting stronger and having a good relationship with nutrition too. So I think it's important too that you're modeling that for your family.
Kind of have that balance. Well, in your book, you talk about fat loss versus weight loss. And I'd love for you to share what the difference is, because I think when people hear that, they're like, well, isn't that the same thing?
Right. No, absolutely. And it is, most people use a bathroom scale to, at some level, if they're watching it, if they are monitoring, they'll use a scale at home to see if they're making progress. And I think what most people don't recognize is that there is a difference between losing body fat, which doesn't do our metabolism any benefit, and then there's losing lean mass, losing muscle. And like I alluded to earlier, your lean mass content is what's driving your metabolism, and our metabolism is the efficiency with which we break down and use food and drink as energy. So we want to keep that high. And so if you're losing weight and you're not doing it mindfully and you're going on super low-calorie restrictive diets that are going to potentially also cause you to lose some of your muscle mass, you get on the scale and you say, ooh, I've lost 10 pounds this week. Yay me. But how much of that was part of your metabolism? How much of that was lean muscle that you've lost? So if you're not doing things slowly, progressively, gradually, it does take longer. And that's where people want that quick fix, 20 pounds in 20 days. But are you setting yourself up for long-term failure because you're not taking care of your metabolism? So we've seen and heard stories of people that lose 100, 200 pounds on some of these shows and these, real-world episodes of different shows, and they come back 2 years later and they say they've gained it all back plus some because they couldn't sustain that level of restriction and that level of exercise. So doing it mindfully and slowly allows you to really target your body fat and maintain your muscle so that you are losing weight, but you're losing the right kind of weight.
Gosh, that's so important because it is easy to kind of get thinking like, oh, I'm dropping all this weight. It must be doing good, when it could be the muscle mass that you really need to keep.
Exactly. And there's a lot of opportunities out there with technology to track that. We use a machine in our studio here in Nashville, but there are things out there like a bod pod is one, and the hydrostatic weighing, which is sort of an underwater weighing. You look at water displacement. So there's ways to track that. So we would definitely urge you, if you are watching your weight right now and trying to lose through the holiday, you might want to see if somebody in your area has a way to look at that composition instead of just the body weight.
Oh, what great advice that is. Well, and so in your book, you talk about metabolic damage. What is that, and is it a real thing?
So I don't like the term damage because I don't believe you really damage your metabolism. Does your metabolism adapt over time as you change your body weight and your body composition? Absolutely. So if you are on a low-calorie restriction of intake and you stay on that for an extended period of time and you're diligent with it, your body will adjust and it will become more efficient, meaning that it can produce energy on less and less food. And that's not a negative thing. Our body's built to survive. So if you were in a situation where you weren't given food or you didn't have access to food, it would become more efficient so that it could still function with less food. On a diet, though, it does the same thing. It suppresses, it down-regulates because you're eating less, but it still needs to function through the day. So let's say you're eating 1,000 calories on a restrictive diet, and you lose the weight, and you feel great, and you say, okay, I'm done. I'm ready to go back to eating my normal amount of intake, and you don't allow your body to adapt to a higher intake, and you start eating, let's say, 2,000 calories a day. Well, your body's only now functioning to take in 1,000 calories, and you start eating twice as much. So now you start gaining that weight back, and you usually gain it even more quickly. So that's the yo-yo effect that we see. We restrict first 12 weeks, and we're doing great. We lose all this weight, and now we're ready to just go back to normal life. But we don't do it slowly enough to where our metabolism catches up with us. And so we gain it all back plus a little, and then we get frustrated and we go back on a diet. So that's the vicious cycle that we all go through. So the metabolic suppression, the adaptation that happens in weight loss is a real thing. But I just don't like the word damage because that indicates it can't come back. And our metabolism is very resilient. It will come back if we retrain it to take in more food and to adapt back up to calories that are more maintenance level.
Well, and it's all about knowing the right things to sustain our bodies with. And, a lot of times people think, okay, well, the right kind of foods are going to be pretty disgusting, because they're so used to hearing about these different diet foods that are, they kind of have the equivalency to, like, I've had friends compare them, like, the crackers to, like, siding of a house.
Yeah, like cardboard.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's come a long way, though, right?
It has. I think that there's still this thought that if I am on any kind of nutritional plan, I have to eat bland chicken and steamed broccoli every meal, or I'm never going to make any progress. And I think that for me, it's an 80-20 balance. I think that also the more you can control, if you cook at home, you have a lot more opportunity to infuse flavor in things and to have bigger portions because you're controlling what's in the food you're eating. Eating out is a struggle because you just don't know what's in the food. You don't know how they're marinating it, what kind of sauces they're using. They're cooking probably in lots of oils and butters, and that's really yummy and tasty. But if we do that most of the week, it's going to start to add up. So I think that if you can learn to kind of control that and use some creative ways to season and doctor things up. I mean, we make homemade pizzas a lot. We have taco night. We have great chili in the winter when it's cold. So I think that you just have to put in a little bit of time to eat the food you enjoy and maybe just modify the types of ingredients you're using. If you're baking things, one of the great ways to cut some of the fat is to use applesauce instead of olive oil or cooking oil, because it keeps the moisture in the brownies, but you don't have all the added fat. So I think it's also, too, about just doing a little research and saying, I can still eat some of these things. I might just have to tweak the ingredients a little bit. But I also have that 20% of eat the birthday cake, have the donut at the office. Like, if you are struggling with weight management and you're looking to lose, you can't restrict. Restriction leads to excess. So you have to find ways to work those in and enjoy life, or you're not going to stick with it. And that's, I think, one of the struggles that people have with these really restrictive, trendy diets is they are so restrictive you can't sustain it for the long term. So finding ways to work in things you enjoy, a happy hour after work, go have a glass of wine and have an appetizer, but maybe you eat a light dinner that night. It's just about balance.
Yeah, and being able to sustain that balance, when people, because, my gosh, your book, I found it to be really awesome because it's got these places where it's more interactive and people can really get involved, so they're doing these parts. What happens when they finish the book? Then how do they keep going?
Well, I'm hoping that the education, like you mentioned, I wanted to infuse some hands-on ownership, buy-in, understanding of the process so that when you walk away, you have a grasp on why you made the changes that you did, and you dug a little deeper into the mental aspect of things and the drivers of motivation for doing this and making lifestyle choices. So is it ever going to be easy? No. This is going to be a work in progress. It's all for all of us, even professionals. We have to think about these things. We have to stay mindful, and you'll ebb and flow through the month and through the year. But I'm hoping that with the education, you at least can walk away with some understanding of, okay, when I want to make adjustments again, or if I see things kind of falling back into old patterns, I can go back to these exercises and back to these mindset modules that I call them, and remember some of the pointers and the takeaways that were there. So I think for me, I'm hoping that infusing more of an education will help it be more long-term.
Well, I think that's such a great place for people to be, because the thing is, it could get pretty intense doing this work. And then, you have such a great book for people to do that with. Do you ever, work with people one-on-one? I'm sure you're so busy you don't have time to do that.
Well, I wish I said that I didn't have time and I was so busy, but I just could never give that up, because that to me is the root of this, making time to work with people face-to-face and to have a high-touch motivational opportunity. You can't ever replace that. And so I will always leave a space for that. We do have a studio here in Nashville where we work with people one-on-one, customizing programs for them, whether they're looking to put on weight or lose weight or maintain. And we really look at, from an individual standpoint, what is their body composition. They track food with me through the week, so we're looking at intake and we're communicating, and they're completing the same types of educational modules. So absolutely. And I work with people remotely, not just in Nashville, but wherever they are. We do a lot of web chats and phone chats to check in. Technology makes it so amazing anymore that you can really connect with people no matter where they are.
Isn't that the best? We live in a great age.
It is. And, for a while I thought, there's just no replacing somebody walking in my office, and I don't know that I'll ever change that perspective. But the web chatting, the Skypes or FaceTime or whatever the avenue may be, it's amazing. You really do feel like you're right there with your client, and you can see them, and you can, really see their expressions and their emotions and connect with them. So I really have kind of changed my perspective on that over the last couple of years, that it is equally effective in a lot of ways. And I think sometimes more so because it's more convenient and people can stick with it because they can plug in no matter where they are,
And make it kind of fit around their lives, which is,
Exactly, which is a barrier. If they can't get in the office and they can't come, they tend to get frustrated. I just can't make time to get in there. But if we could jump on a call and touch base and connect and just at least chat and give them a little bit of a pep talk, then sometimes it just keeps people on track. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know on your website you have a lot of resources for people. And why don't you share your website for our listeners so they know where to connect with you and be part of your community?
Awesome. Yeah. So my website, my URL is workwithdrtiff.com. So www.workwithdrtiff.com. And just rolled that out this year and super excited about the new site and has so much opportunity to connect. Always can jump on a free call with me, a 15-minute chat on the website. So if you're not sure about coaching, then that gives you a great opportunity to just ask some more questions even right there. So.
Yeah, well, you've got a lot of great resources on the website and, of course, in your book, The Metabolic Makeover. Dr. Tiffany, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Well, thanks again for the invite and for giving me the opportunity to share what I have to share with everyone else.
Thank you, Dr. Tiffany. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and, of course, to talk about your new book, The Metabolic Makeover. Again, The Metabolic Makeover is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie bookstores. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.